have a great day planned. We're going to hear Chan has a devotion. Chris is going to do a little training, as will Tom. And Turi is going to do a deal on new things. Before that, I want to share a little vision piece. I get to work with church planters and leaders. That's where I spend most of my time. Hanging out, coaching, recruiting, talking with church planters and leaders. For the last several months, I've just been with a lot of church planters, a lot of leaders, and as I've been in these conversations with these church planters, there's some, I don't know if I would call them red flags that have popped up, or not just problems, concerns. Let me just say there have been some questions that have come up, and I want to go over maybe 5 or 6 questions that have popped up in, say, the last 2 months of me working with church planters and leaders. I just want to share these questions with you. If you're a church planter, I think there's some questions for you. If you're in ministry or just in life, and all of us are working with some sort of Christian organization, I think these questions are pertinent to all of us. And here's the first question. Can you clearly articulate your vision? Can you clearly explain your vision? I was with a church planter not terribly long ago, and he's been on site for over a year, gathering this launch team. They were gearing up to launch, and I said, how's it going? And he said, it's really not going that great. A lot of the launch team members are falling off the launch team. And I said, what do you think the issue is? And he said, the issue is they're not catching the vision. He said, it's such a great vision I have, but they're not necessarily grabbing hold of it and owning it. And I said, well, give me your vision. Give me your 1-minute elevator speech. And he said, oh, I don't have it down to elevator speech, or I mean, I can't really tell you what it is. And I just had to stop him. And I said, you know, if you don't have your vision in an elevator speech, you probably, you know what I'm talking about, elevator speech, maybe a 30-second, 1 minute. If you don't have it down to that, you probably don't really have a vision, or just not clear enough. And he actually thanked me for that. He's been working on it. By the way, we did one of these in San Francisco a couple weeks ago. And this guy's been struggling. He came. This other guy came who just was in our town. He put a thing on Facebook, I'm starting a church. And his Facebook post was just so weird that my son got together with them and said, this guy's a good guy, but he just doesn't really know. He launched his church on Easter Sunday at 5 p.m. And two people came. And anyway, he came to our gathering, and I asked this guy who was struggling with the vision at the baseball game, we went to a Giants game. I said, how was today for you? He said, oh, today was phenomenal. I said, why? He said, because you know that guy? He knows even less than I do. Kind of an encouraging But can you clearly articulate your vision? So I told that story in Phoenix with a bunch of church planters and leaders, and said, let's go around the room and tell us your elevator speech. They couldn't do it. There's a guy who had a church of 1,500. He couldn't say what his church was doing. And we tried that in Colorado, and it didn't go. I don't even ask that anymore. I just want to say, what's your elevator speech? If you turn to, I guess, page 3, just turn the page, I put down kind of our 1-minute, 2-minute, 5-minute, 10-minute elevator speech of what we're trying to do with church planting. I got a cool job, because when people on an airplane or something ask me, what do you do? I just say, I help people start churches. That is so much better than saying I'm a pastor. They don't get nearly as uncomfortable. They're like, what is that? So what we try to do is help people start churches. Our vision comes from Acts 13, which is where church planting started in the Bible. That in the church in Antioch, There were these high-level leaders. They're listed here while they were worshiping the Lord and fasting. By the way, we asked all of our church planters, definitely all of our leaders, to fast one meal a week for church planters and church planting, that God would raise up more church planters and church leaders. While they're worshiping the Lord and fasting, the Holy Spirit spoke to them. The Holy Spirit said, "Set apart Barnabas and Saul for the work I have for them." So they didn't immediately say no like we do today. They didn't say, "God, we can't. Barnabas is our top giver, Saul's our youth pastor, we're in a building program, you don't know how bad the economy is, the government is just bad here, we're not large enough, we don't have enough money." They didn't do any of that. They fasted and prayed some more to make sure it was God. Sometimes you hear from God and it's not really God, it's what you had for lunch, picking itself back up. But then after that, they laid hands on Barnabas and Saul and they sent them out. And this is what we try to do, Acts 13. Spot high-level leaders. If you're in the rooms because somebody said, "Come to this," you may be a high-level leader. And we're always on the lookout for high-level leaders. We're always looking for the next guy. We're always trying to do the leadership development of raising up the next person. So spotting high-level leaders, setting them up for success. We don't just say, "Go give it a shot," which is what happened to us in our first church plant way back in the 80s. They said, "Go for it." It actually went well, but we saw so many of our friends thrown into a position where they were just going to fail. We don't do that. We have a strange goal in our network, and that goal is 100% success rate. Right now with Excel, we're running at 100% success rate, so don't be the one to screw it up. With the different denominations that we work with, we're in the 95% ranking there, but we spot high-level leaders, set them up for success, send them out, and then support them, and then we have 10 support environments or systems. Spiritual vitality, funding is number 2, show me the money. God's 1, money's 2. Inviting is just a constant environment of looking for the next person. We have our discovery, assessing environment number 4, vision alignment. After you come through the Discovery Center, we help you put your proposal perspective together. Training, coaching, and caring, that's what a lot of today is. We'll do a little bit, some training pieces, maybe get a chance to meet with your coach at the game. And caring, we care by giving you a ticket to the Dodger game, some tacos, and some money for snacks. No, we care by getting you tickets to an Angel game, and that's real care. I'll tell you what, we'll give you the ticket, you're going to see it however you want. And then the last 2 environments, one is creativity. We don't have one standard for this is what a church should look like. And you just, we went over the road, and this is a different group. I mean, and all of our groups are like this. If you're planting, like Chan, Korean guy planting in Compton, that's going to look a little bit different, isn't it? Than Mission Viejo, multicultural, than what you're doing in Huntington Beach. Different areas of Tijuana even, right? They look differently. Downtown, what you guys are doing in Pomona, Duarte, that's going to be different from what you guys are doing. Long Beach, that's going to look different than China, right? So creativity, we pick high-level leaders to figure it out, and then partnering. Last thing is we will partner. That's big for us. As long as God gets the credit, the rest of us can share it as partners here, right? And we don't care if your denomination gets it or not. There's a couple other things, just some values, objectives, and bottom line strategies. We plant our own churches, and then we partner with other groups like Transformation Ministries to help them plant. But what is that little elevator? That was probably 8 floors, on the elevator. But can you clearly articulate your vision down to this is what we do? I would recommend this annoying book, Donald Miller, Building Your Story Brand. Anybody seen it? Did you like it? What, did you find it annoying, or was it just me? Yeah. Have you seen it? Yeah. Basically, just just phrasing it, what?
How to market.
It's really a marketing book. But a lot of it's getting that vision down to when they go on your website, one of the things he says over and over there, nobody reads websites anymore. They just kind of glance and look for the next step. So what is he trying to do? Can you articulate your vision? Secondly, is your vision big enough? That's a question, a concern, kind of an issue that's come up with a lot of different conversations I've had with church planters over the last little while, and it usually comes up in terms of money. I'll be talking to a church planter who says, well, I don't need the money. And then I'm talking to his coach, and the coach will say, what do you mean he doesn't need the money? He's working full time, on the side. That's not a money issue, that's a vision issue. Is our vision big enough? And we got to hear from somebody who just changed 50 churches in Tijuana. When I tell people, yeah, we're working with one of our partners to try to start 50 churches in Tijuana, they're like, yeah, good luck. And then when we say, he's at 41 right now, then they go, what? What? 41 churches in Mexico? And now to hear it's 500? That's not a problem for Daniel. The vision's big enough. So Daniel is one of the best fundraisers I know. He's got a tremendous advantage because he is doing most of his, I don't want to use the term fundraising anymore, let's call it ministry partner development. That's a nice one. What does everybody call it, group?
MPD.
MPD, yeah. But you're doing that in the U.S., and we would love to support churches as long as they're not close to us and nice and wealthy. Right? But are you doing the fund discovery? You're doing the MPD. And I talked about this before, that you've got to put it to a certain, it's got to be on the front burner. If you're in pre-launch, you're going to spend about 50% of your time in MPD. If you're in the first year, it's still probably, it's at least 10% of your time, at least one day every 2 weeks, probably one day a week, where you're working on that. And that's a vision thing. And the cool thing is, God's got the money out there. It's just, are we out there asking for it? And you can read books about that, that's great, but the biggest thing is you got to get out there and do it, right? So, is your vision large enough? Third, I have a similar question. Are you spending time in personal evangelism? You would think in church planting that's just not a concern, because that's why we go into it, right? But it just goes to the back burner very quickly. So a friend of mine in Texas last week, and he was talking, and you know Rick Moore's 5 purposes of the church. Anybody know what those are, the 5?
I can't remember.
Yeah.
Worship, fellowship, evangelism,
Yeah.
Ministry, mission, magnification,
Yeah.
or worship.
There's like 5. We call it worship, fellowship, discipleship, stewardship, helping others get on board the ship, or whatever it is. So he said, if outreach or evangelism is 1/5, if it's 20%, you got to treat it like it's 50%, otherwise it's just going to drop down to nothing. It's something that just slides off the table. It's the first thing to go when your children's ministry person resigns. It's the evangelism, the first thing to go when the worship team is terrible. It's the first thing to go when the pastor resigns. It's the first thing to go, and we've got to make it a high priority. Now, if you have an evangelism gift, who's got the gift of evangelism in here? Yeah. I love being with them. I these people the Lord whether they want to or not. And pardon me?
That's it.
Do you have evangelism? Okay, so I don't need to talk to you, but the rest of us, man, are you doing? And you'd be surprised how many church planters that just doesn't happen. And sometimes the only way to grow your church is just win people into your church. you win them to Christ, they're going to come to church. Right? So that's the third question. Fourth, this is a concern. Are you taking advantage of coaching opportunities? In the San Francisco event, 2 weeks ago, my son Scott came, and Scott has his own financial planning business that he started. He was one of the Dave Ramsey ELP guys. So 3 years ago, Scott comes to me, and Scott's big at coaching. He hired this coach, and he comes to me and says, I found this coaching program I want to get involved in. It's $5,000 a month, and it's a 3-year commitment. And you can't get out of it. And I'm like, what? It's $5,000 a month, so it's $60,000 a year for 3 years. Yes, it costs more than an MBA from USC, which you can probably get if your movie star mom just pays someone outside. Sorry. So I'm like, you can't do that. That's $5,000 a month. He said, well, I think I got my business now to where we can actually afford that. I won't get paid to do this. So he signed up for $5,000 a month for coaching. The first month, his income went up $7,000 a month. And right now, he's bringing in well over $60,000 a month. His business now is just catered to high-end people. He calls it Seek First. He works only with high-end people who want to give a lot of weight to. But and so he's not done with it, actually. He's got just a couple more months left on his $5,000 a month commitment. So while he's waiting for it to end, he just hired another coach for $2,000 a month.
Mind coach?
Yeah, he's had a voice coach that helps him with his presentation, recording like this. This is recorded, Scott's lovely. Everything he does, he records and goes through it with his coach. He records it video, but he also records it audio. And he has a mind coach to work through some limiting beliefs of what you. And he just loves coaching. I had him come and talk about that just to see the looks on different people's faces when he actually said, I'm spending over $7,000 a month on coaching. And the reason I wanted to tell that story is it works. And a lot of church planners just aren't taking advantage of their coach. And I know it's difficult. In our network, the way it works is you get into the network, you pick your coach because we want it to be somebody that you really want. And if it doesn't work, pick somebody else. And our coaches realize that that's going to happen. Basically, in a sense, you're hiring this person, so we're paying, but you're hiring, so make sure it works for you. But are you taking advantage of it? I've got several new coaches this year in different areas of my life, and it just makes a difference knowing that somebody's going to talk to you about it once a month or once a week or 3 times a week. One of our top coaches, David Cook, says that coaching is scheduling time to think. You actually are scheduling that hour session to think about your ministry. And most of us, we get so caught up in things, we're not even thinking about it. So, are you taking advantage of coaching opportunities? Here's the flip side. Some of you guys should be coaching. Charlie, are you coaching anybody yet? See, how many, what percentage of Spanish-speaking churches in Mexico are larger than yours?
Well, in our city, there's a few, and our community, I think, are the largest.
Yeah. So, I mean, you ought to be doing that. Are you coaching? Are you coaching your guys? No. So, Ivan's doing a lot of coaching. Chan, you're, what, how many months into this?
More than a year.
Okay, what are you waiting for, buddy? So just think about who should you be coaching, and maybe it's not, I mean, maybe it's just, maybe you're not a church planter, but I mean, you should be coaching, because what happens when you're coaching other people, it really helps you. Because you're spending that time, scheduling that time to think, and you're helping somebody else think, it causes you to think. So is that the fourth question? Number 5, are you working on your preaching? It's in Dallas about 3 weeks ago. Went to the grand opening of this new building for this one church. And it's a church plant that's been around 12 years. They actually did the buy land, build the building. Like, I think you guys are the only people in the state of California that are doing that.
Doing like that? What's that?
Bought land, building a building.
Yeah.
So they did the whole thing, and they had the dedication thing, and this guy, and there was probably 2,000 people there. And they did a sermon, and then from there, I went with a friend of mine. We went to a church plant that's just a year old in Arlington. And they have 2 services on Sunday nights, one at 5 and one at 7. And this church, it's an amazing church in that the target group is 16 to 24-year-olds. I've never felt so old in my life. I mean, 2 worship songs, 40 minutes. I knew them by the time they were over. I knew them halfway through. They do dinner in between, and the older people are cooking that. And there was one guy standing off by himself, and I went up to him. He was about my age. I said, "Hey, what's your story?" He said, "Well, I'm Max. I'm the pastor's dad, so we have a lot in common." But I'm driving away with my friend, Dave Bennett, who's just a coach extraordinary. We're driving away, and I said, "Dave, what do you think?" And he said, after being at the 2,000, one of this church is killing it, and he said, "Why can't our planters learn to introduce their sermons in a coherent way?" It's because they're not working on the preaching. And the tendency is to just not work on it and let it slide. And you might be the best preacher in the room. I'll just say that you are. You can get better. So are you working on your preaching? One last question, and this is just in addition to the one that just came out this week. My son preached on the John 4, on the John the Baptist passage where they come to him and said, "Hey, everybody's going over to Jesus' baptism. And you're the guy who kind of invented it. They're going over there. What are we going to do about it?" And, maybe Jesus said that John the Baptist was the greatest of all born among women. Isn't that, what's that line?
Born of a woman.
Yeah. Maybe he's at the top because he was so secure and we're so insecure. But, he had that line that just really gets you. It says, he must become greater and greater, and I must become lesser and lesser. And I think, man, in ministry, are we trying to be greater and greater, or are we trying to point to Jesus and become lesser and lesser? It's easy to get caught up, and it's about me, my ministry, my network, my church, whatever it is I'm doing, instead of being like John the Baptist, where they said, "What are you going to do?" And he says, "Well, this is what God's called me to do." And Tim used, I can't remember what version it was, but he says, "God's called me to do this, that is all." And finding our lane, doing that, saying it's about God, not me. So are you making Jesus greater and greater and yourself lesser and lesser? So those are 6 questions. Just ask. And the other thing about those questions is, the weird thing about most of those questions is they don't always have a direct result in what the ministry looks like. You know? But if you can get those things figured out, you get a clear vision and a big vision, and you're talking about raising funds, ministry, partner development, outside the church, inside the church, and that's a priority. If you're talking to people about Jesus, if you're working with a coach, coaching other people, if you're preaching, and if you are making him great, then man, everything's going to, you know, things are going to go good, whether they're going good or not. So
At that time, Herod the Tetrarch heard about the fame of Jesus, and he said to his servants, "This is John the Baptist. He has been raised from the dead. That is why these miraculous powers are at work in him." For Herod had seized John and bound him and put him in prison for the sake of Herodias, his brother Philip's wife, because John had been saying to him, "It is not lawful for you to have her." And though he wanted to put him to death, he feared the people, because they called him to be a prophet. Amen. The challenge that I constantly give to people that I meet and also to my church members is that there are two types of people in the world. One type is people who fear men, and the other type is people who fear God. And John the Baptist, as JD talked about, was a different type of man, and he was definitely one of who feared God. Here in our passage, we see a stark contrast between John and Herod. You see in verse 1, Herod the Tetrarch heard about the fame of Jesus, and he said to his servant, "This is John the Baptist." He got scared that Jesus, this person, this Savior, might have come back as John the Baptist. So he was really worried because all that he was thinking about was fearing men. If you look at verse 3, "For Herod had seized John and bound him and put him in prison for the sake of Herodias, his brother Philip's wife." And this is Bible drama right there. He's married to brother Philip's wife. So that was a situation that he was already in, but you see in verse 4, John's life was completely different than of Herod, because John had been saying to him, "It is not lawful for you to have it." Had been saying to him, not once, not twice, but constantly saying, "What you're doing is wrong." And because of this, Herodias and Herod really didn't like hearing the truth. As church planters, we need to speak the truth, the Word of God, the gospel, although it may be painful to certain people. It may be difficult for people to hear, or even our supporting members, or even the church planning team, launch team. We need to speak the truth. The question is, in our life, are we like Herod or are we like John the Baptist? Are we fearing men or are we fearing God? That's the decision that we make. When we wake up in the morning, when we go to church, when we go to work, when we go into our ministry, what is the decision I am making today? Am I thinking about Herodias? Or am I becoming like Herod? Am I choosing to fear men in the world? Look at verse 5. It just says it out straight. "And though he wanted to put him to death, he feared the people." So he was fearing his wife. He was fearing John the Baptist while he was alive, because people considered him to be a prophet. So he was so scared. He was scared of everyone. He just looked at how people are going to view him, how people are going to think of him. And how many times in our planter's life we think that way? What's people going to think of me? What is my launch team going to think of me? What is the community going to think of me? But in our Christian life, we're really called upon to fear God and Him alone. How much did he fear God? You know, he was considered born of a woman to be the greatest man. And as he shared that he must become less, not become greater. How much did he fear God? It costed John the Baptist his head, because he constantly had been saying to Herod, "What you're doing is wrong." Are we preaching the truth? Are we speaking the truth of God, the Word of God into people's lives. No matter what people may say to us, are we fearing God in the situation, even in the most difficult circumstance? I am in Compton. People think I'm crazy. People say very, very mean things to me when I'm doing ministry there. But it's fearing God. It's not fearing men that I am there. And A.T. Robertson, a New Testament scholar, once said about John the Baptist, it cost him his head. But it is better to have a head like John the Baptist on a platter and lose it than to have an ordinary head and keep it. Let me end with Proverbs 29:25. And God spoke about this in Proverbs as well. The fear of men lays a snare, but whoever trusts in the Lord is safe. So as church planters and leaders of ministry, who we're going to choose? Are we going to choose to fear God, or are we going to choose to fear men? It's a simple choice we have.
I actually, quick confession, misunderstood what JD was asking me to do. So I actually put together, but I think this really was God, because I put together a devotional that I walked away from because I wasn't sitting right with me, and I started going, I found out that what he wanted me to talk about was really something else, and I was like, you know what, I think I'm going to talk about leadership development, and then, what's your name? Sorry.
Tony.
Tony brought it up, and I was like, you know what, that's what I'm going to talk about. So the last 2 years, I've been doing leadership development in our church. I've been studying it, listening to podcasts, going to conferences, like you name it. And so I want to kind of share with you all, and hopefully it'll be helpful to you, where we're at right now at the church I'm at, and how it's affecting me as I go to plant church. So a little bit of context, first of all, to share with you why I believe so much in leadership development. When I was a youth pastor, I would say I was not like a typical youth pastor. I acted more like a church planter than a youth pastor. I was working 7 days a week. I was out 4 nights a week. Just a crazy, crazy schedule. I was a workaholic for sure. My wife was working on me for years. One day, my pastor hands me this book called Next Generation Leaders by Andy Stanley, and I opened it up to, I think it was the first chapter, and I don't normally do this, but I started crying because the title of the chapter was "You Are Doing Too Much." And I was just so tired and just so burned out that when I read that, all of a sudden this emotion came over me, and I was like, what is this, And as I started reading it, my life was just forever changed by that book. And all of a sudden, the first thing that came was this conviction. And the conviction was that I did not want to be a Joshua leader. I wanted to be a Moses leader. And most of us hold up Joshua pretty high, but I want you to think about this. When Moses left, he left us with Joshua. When Joshua left, it said, a generation came that did not know the Lord. And there was no leader. And I did not want to one day hand over my youth ministry. I didn't want to one day walk away from anything without leaving a very good leader in its place. And so all of a sudden this revelation came to me, and this is where I feel like leadership development really sunk deep into my heart, as I realized for the first time that it was more important what I left behind when I leave this earth more than what I do. The more important than what I do was who I left behind, and that really sunk deep into my heart. And so to share with you a journey before I share with you what we do now for leadership development, this is pretty cool, at least in my mind. We had this shift where at Ignite, which was the youth ministry I led, it used to be like every youth ministry, how can we get as many kids in there as possible? All of a sudden, our vision shifted to what we felt like was a successful youth ministry is how many kids after they graduated want to come back and keep going to church. And at the time, for a long time, we only had 10 leaders, we had 150 students. We were overwhelmed with work and kids and all that. Well, all of a sudden, that shifted over the next year after I began focusing on leadership development. We now have 40 youth leaders that are former students that stick around, and our ratio is about 2 to 1, about 2 students to every 1 leader, which is amazing. And now, this is probably the coolest thing to me, half of our staff, I think we have about 20 staff members right now, are former Ignite students. And that to me was just a huge win, showing that our youth ministry was working, that people were coming up through the pipeline and becoming staff members at our church. And so, to share with you, first of all, like, that's why our pastor came to me when I felt called to plant a church. He asked me, he said, hey, can you stay for the next 2 years? And can you start a leadership development in our culture? Can you formulate a leadership pipeline system so that, like you've done at Ignite, we can see people coming up to these ministries and being empowered and moved up into leadership. So let me share with you now, like, kind of what we do, and I hope it's helpful to you. So, the first thing I think that became really crucial is I was trying to find a way to articulate how I did what we did at Ignite. Like, I couldn't put it into words. And so let me share this with you. I hope this isn't completely different or offensive to you, but I want to share with you that I've learned a lot of people, and if this is you, I respect this vision, but it's just different than me. A lot of people believe that discipleship is student-based discipleship, that is discipleship. That in order to be a disciple of Jesus Christ, we have to be a student. And what that means to a lot of people is you go to a class, and after that class, you are, like someone waves a magic wand and you are now a disciple. I understand that theory, but I believe that that's incomplete discipleship. When I read the Gospels and when I've talked to a lot of people, and I think this is probably the case with you, we didn't go to some class and then all of a sudden we came out, or even maybe even went to school for a few months. When you came out of that, you weren't exactly like this fully devoted follower of Christ that was this great leader. Most likely what happened with you is what happened with me. Someone did life with you. And so what we believe in is what we call mastery-based discipleship, not student-based discipleship. And so for us, classroom is great, teaching people theology is great and it's important, but we just believe that's incomplete discipleship. And so what we do is we have classes that people can learn and grow in for sure. We hope that they learn and grow through our sermons that we teach on Sundays. But we actually have a system in place that someone is able to be doing life with someone else. And so what we believe, this is kind of like a conviction that we have, and that is that we believe that there's gold in our pews. And so let me kind of explain that to you. So we believe, and I think you do too as pastors, that out in our pews are people sitting there with bags of gold, right? Like, you remember the whole parable, Jesus taught us that there's this master who leaves 5 bags of gold, 3 bags of gold, 1 bag of gold, right? Well, we believe, and I think you believe this too, that there are people out there that are sitting there, these bags of gold, and they're doing absolutely nothing with it. They have all these gifts God's given them, they're doing absolutely nothing with it. And so the question became, and this is what I've learned from a lot of pastors we struggle with, we don't know how to get them and bring them into discipleship. And there's a lot of different methods, so let me tell you what we don't do. We used to do these things, we don't do it anymore. We never make a stage announcement. We never get out there and go, we need more leaders, we need more volunteers. We believe that's a lot like standing up in a room and asking a room full of people, does anybody want to be my girlfriend? It's like, what? Like, you're at that point? It's kind of like, do you want to jump on a sinking ship? Is what we began to realize we were saying to people.
Yeah.
So we don't do that anymore. We used to. If you do that, I understand. We don't do that anymore. We also don't do this. You ever done this before? Preach sermons that are like powerful, right? And they move people's heart, and they sign up. We've had hundreds sign up, and we had like maybe 10 actually start serving. And so we tried that as well. What we've come to believe now is that shoulder tapping is the best and most powerful way to go about it. That's what we call it. So basically just going up to somebody and saying, I see something in you. And to us, when we read the Gospels, like, that's what Jesus did. He went up and he said, you follow me, right? But in that context, in a Jewish culture, it meant something to them that it does not mean to Americans today, or Hispanics in Mexican culture today. You can't just go up and say, follow me, and someone knows what that means. But a rabbi in Jewish culture, that meant something to them. So what does that look like today? To us, it was this. Come follow me, or I want to disciple you. If you said that to anybody, it'll freak them out. It's weird. So this is what we believe it looks like. It's just saying, hey, Ivan, I would love to go out to coffee with you. can we go out to coffee? Or, hey, I'd love to go out to lunch with you, Ivan. Would you be willing to do that? We go out, and after we have that conversation, they don't know this, but we're asking them, hey, I would like to disciple you. I would like for you to follow me. And after that's like usually an invitation to someone's home. Hey, can you come over and have dinner with my family? Or we would invite them to our small group if you have something like that. Or it's inviting them to join your team if you're leading a team or involved in a team. So what we do now is we have this class called V101. And in the class, we teach people what I'm explaining to you right now. And we teach them to shoulder tap. We teach them to go out and ask people, invite them into your life, into discipleship. We never use that word. We just say, hey, can you have dinner sometime? Hey, can you have lunch sometime? And after that, it comes with an action of, hey, would you be willing to join my small group? Or hey, would you be willing to join our ministry? I think you'd be great. And this is the key, is the I see in you approach. We never say we're desperate. We never say, hey, we need volunteers. Would you be willing to be that guy? We never talk like that because it doesn't move people's heart. It doesn't activate that gift inside of them. So instead, here's what we do. I did this on accident, but now it's become like our model. I asked this guy, his name's Matt, he's become a friend of mine. We went out to dinner with he and his fiance, and I was like, hey Matt, like how did you start volunteering at Ignite? Like I can't remember. And he's like, you forgot this? And I was like, yeah, I don't remember. Like how did you start? He's like, you came up to me on a Sunday. I was sitting there in my seat before service, and you walked up and you said, hey, what's your name? And you shook my hand, and I was like, oh, I'm Matt. And you said, you would be amazing with high school students. And I was like, I would? And you were like, dude, you'd be awesome. And I was like, I did that? And he's like, yeah, I completely forgot. And for a minute, I was like, I used to be awesome. You know, like I had boldness, and it was because back then we only had 10 volunteers, and I was desperate, you know? But what I did in that moment, and I realized it looking back when he said that to me, is I didn't say we were desperate. I said what I saw. I saw this buff dude, this good-looking guy who dressed like young people that I could see other young people looking up to, and I said, hey, would you be willing to come and hang out with young kids? I think they'd really look up to you. And I cast that vision. So that's what we teach people to do. And so just to share this last thing with you, so we believe in shoulder tapping. We also have something else called Growth Track. And it's probably what you have right now to get volunteers. And it's like a series of classes that teaches them about our church, about volunteering, about giving, and about small groups and things like that. It's called Growth Track. So here's what we don't want, and we teach people this in V101. We don't want people to come in that way. We call that saying like, I want to get involved. We hope no one ever has to do that. We don't ever want JD, who comes to Vantage Point, to all of a sudden go, I want to serve. What we hope is while JD's getting coffee one day, there's someone, I do this because we have the pump things. Do you guys have the pump things? Yeah. So when someone's like getting coffee one day, then I say, hey JD, or hey you, I don't know who you are, I should say. And we start talking, I say, hey, you should come serve, you should come greet with me, or hey, would you like to hang out sometime? That's what we hope happens. We hope you never have to self-identify, I want to get involved, because if that happens, we believe we failed as a church. So we teach them that as a part of our culture when you want to know more about Vantage Point. And so the last thing I want to share with you is this, that as far as structure, I'm not saying this is perfect, but this is how we do it. There's 5 levels or 5 layers to our leadership development structure. We call it our leadership pipeline. Level 1 is called a team member. And at that level, what we teach them is they're learning to lead themselves. And so this is someone who's just going to church on Sundays, someone who's just coming to start serving as a greeter or whatever. They're just at that moment learning to lead themselves. And at that level, we have, sorry, this is going to get a little nerdy for you, but we have 4 core competencies.
We only got a little bit of time left.
Yeah, okay, cool, yeah. So we have 4 core competencies that they need to learn at that level to learn to lead themselves. Then a level 2 is a lead. At that level, they're learning to lead others. So at this level, there's a different set of competencies that we're teaching them, and we hope that they grow in that way and learn to lead others. And then the 3rd level is what we call leading leaders. And at that point, you're actually leading other leaders in the organization, in the ministry you're part of. And then a level 4 is usually a staff member at this point. And a level 4 is leading a department or a ministry in our church. And so they're leading several leaders at that point. And then lastly, level 5, there's only a couple of those, and they're leading a whole part of the church, so several departments. And so Yeah, that's our leadership development structure. We just want to share it with you. I hope it's helpful. That's kind of what we formed over the years. So.
A few weeks back, I've been the pastor of the church in El Nino for 4 years. My dad was the pastor there. Then I took over, and it's a 20-year-old church this coming November. And so, there's a lot of great things that have happened in the church in El Nino over the 20 years. And I don't know if you've heard this before, but in Mexico, it's really popular that people come and tell you, I remember 15 years ago when we used to do this. I remember, 18 years ago when the Lord moved like that. And you're like, what's going on, And so just talking about that, a couple of weeks ago we had baptisms planned, right? And so we did our discipleship, and we did our stuff, and we're planning, and register if you want to get baptized, come talk to me or register. And so we're 1 week away from baptisms, and only one lady said she wanted to get baptized. And I want to be totally honest with you. It's not that I think it's not worth to baptize one. I know it is. But last time we did it, we had 12 people baptized. So, in my mind, Satan tried to come and bring those gifts, and say, hey, why are you doing wrong this time? There's only one lady. Last time there was 12. You're doing this wrong, you're doing this wrong. So he started attacking me that way. To the point that Sunday morning, I was talking to my wife. It was really cloudy. It almost never rains in Tijuana. It was really cloudy. Right at 11 a.m., it starts raining. And so I told my wife, I'm going to call it off. It's too cold, and so we didn't do it that Sunday. And it was a lot had to do with how I was feeling. I said, it's raining, I said all this, but I came up and I said, next week, we're going to do it. We're going to do baptisms next week. And so, I want to take you to Isaiah 43, verse 15 through 19. I'm just going to read it. I am the Lord, your Holy One, Israel's Creator, your King. This is what the Lord says. He who made a way through the sea, a path through the mighty waters, who drew out the chariots and horses, the army and reinforcements together. And they lay there, never to rise again, extinguished, snuffed out like a wick. Forget the former things. Do not dwell on the past. See, I am doing a new thing. Now it springs up. Do you not perceive it? I'm making a way in the wilderness and streams on the wasteland. And then it keeps going. And I was reading this passage, and I get reminded of this because sometimes, because of the way we're feeling and what has happened in the past, we can see that God's doing new things right in front of us. And so the lady that said, I'm going to get baptized, didn't show up that Sunday. She didn't even come to church that Sunday. But another lady came up and said, hey, I just went through the discipleship process, and this morning I had a bottle with God. I was talking to God, and I was saying, God, not today. I'm not going to get baptized today. But next time, I'll do it. And then I come up at the end of the service, and I say, we're going to do it next time. It's going to be next week. And so she comes and says, God is doing something in me, and I want to get baptized. And so we work with her through the whole week. We get to next Sunday, and not only her, but another 3 people come up and say, I want to get baptized. But sometimes we get so caught up in what happened in the past, because Isaiah 43:15 is talking about great things that the Lord did for His people. But He said, forget about all that. I'm doing a new thing. And for me, it was like, I was so concerned of the job that I was doing, that has happened in the past, that I wasn't seeing what God was doing, the new thing that He was doing, and the new people that have come to church. And so that got me thinking, what are the things that we are stuck in right now in the past that don't let us see the new thing that God is doing? And even in this moment where we're building a new community center and we're doing all this, that might take me away from seeing the new things that He's doing in people and even in me. And so my question and my thinking about this is just that, what is it that is keeping you from seeing the new thing that God is doing in your life, in your family, in your ministry, and in your life? And so that's what I have.